All right, and I'm going to turn it over to our AI Chair, Janet Riley Wright.
Good evening, and welcome. Welcome, and thank you so much for coming out to be a part of this event and joining us with our Black History Forum. We have some wonderful speakers, and if you know anything about the two people that we'll be focusing on this evening, you may learn some things you did not know, and probably shouldn't know, because you weren't in the household. You weren't a part of this private environment, private and public environment of both Dr. Tillman and Dr. Jones. And we thank their daughters for being with us this evening. We have Miss Adrienne Jones. That would be the daughter of I messed up last night, Julius Jones. So I want to make sure I didn't mess up again this evening. And Adrienne comes with us tonight. She was born in Nashville, Tennessee, and she attended Andrews High School. She went to Winston-Salem State. She is self-employed right now as a real estate investor. And then we have Miss Chiquita Tillman with us, Tillman McAllister with us this evening. And Chiquita was born in Troy, North Carolina. She has her degree in human development, MED in human development. And she went to North Carolina A&T State University. And she has a business administration degree from the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. So these two ladies have been so gracious and so kind as to share some of the private information, some of the information that we didn't know about these two gentlemen. And some of us may have known some of these things. I'm sure we're going to laugh a little. We're going to remember a lot. And we're going to love a lot during this time. We were doing that actually just before the forum started. It was like we were having a short little family reunion right here on Zoom. So we do thank everybody for being here. And if you have questions, please put those questions in the chat. If you're on phone and you want to text those questions, please text the questions or comments to 336-577-4368. Well, thank you.
Well, thank you, Janet, for sharing that with us and about our speakers for tonight. And we look forward to having you all with us and learning a little bit about some of the unknown things that we have had happen in our community. I'm going to tell you a little bit about us. We are the African American Initiative of United Way of Greater High Point. And United Way of Greater High Point is located here, right in your area. We service High Point, Archdale, Trinity, and Jamestown. So tonight we're highlighting some things in the High Point community. But AEI of the United Way of Greater High Point is a group of citizens with a connection to Greater High Point that are working to provide and to support opportunities that engage and promote growth and development in Greater High Point's African American and other minority and underserved communities. Membership in AEI is open to anyone who supports the mission. We will be talking about Dr. Otis Tillman tonight, and Dr. Julius Jones, presented by both of their precious daughters. So we want to thank them and thank you for joining us tonight. And I'm going to turn it over to Natalie Wilson from Fox 8, who will be our moderator and host tonight.
Okay, thank you so much, Latoya and Janet. I appreciate.
Sorry, Natalie, I hit mute by accident on you.
Okay, I'm sorry about that. Can you hear me okay? Okay. Well, Latoya and Janet, thank you so much for the invitation. I'm so excited. And Miss Tillman McAllister and Miss Jones, I really appreciate you both being here tonight. I just respect your family legacy so much. And of course, both of your fathers are known to our community, but we will never know them the way that you do. So I'm going to ask you a few questions tonight. And as Janet said, we're going to laugh, but also be informed, talking about their contributions and really what we need to bring that back to our community moving forward. So I just want to start with you sharing with us why your fathers wanted to pursue a career in medicine. And Ms. Jones, feel free to answer that question first.
I don't know why he chose medicine. I know he enjoyed science, but how he ended up as a physician, I have no idea. I do know that he was the first in his family to graduate college. And he used to tell a story over and over again about when he was a little boy. He was a mischievous little boy. And he had a teacher that told him that he would never amount to much. So he told that story so many times that I think that teacher probably motivated him to prove that he would amount to something more than ever expected.
Yes. And Miss Jones, your father, he was the son of a sharecropper. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah.
Okay. So opportunities and what the future looked like, there were probably some limitations at that time.
Limitations, and he came from a small community, Bethel, North Carolina. I think I did a little research one time, and I think that it was probably a pretty agricultural area with a high minority population. So not much expected from Bethel.
Wow, good for him. Ms. Tillman McAllister, I'll ask you the same thing. Did Dr. Tillman ever express why he pursued a career in medicine?
Well, I'm like Adrian, you know, a lot of times they didn't share some of the real negative things that were going on in rural parts of where they grew up. But what I do remember is when I was little, him telling me the story about how a little boy was hit by a car. They lived right off the highway. They didn't even have street names. They had highway names. And the little boy ran out into the highway because kids were picking on him because he stuttered. And daddy was in the group of boys, but he just kept saying, why are they doing that? Why are they doing that? And so he ended up running after him and, you know, tried to help him. And he said that he felt so guilty because he didn't stop them from picking at him. So it was a thing of difference, but it was also in the rural area where he didn't have any opportunities, he didn't have any family around him. And he ended up dying. But after that, daddy said that he would spend his life trying to be a doctor or to find a way to help other people in that rural area, because it was farms and, you know, things like that. I can remember him telling me stories about trying to help people with, oh gosh, all kinds of things, tobacco and things like that. So that's what he ended up doing growing up, but he still would go to school. But then after that incident, he decided that he was not going to be a part of treating somebody differently and then they would end up dying for that. So I know that was the first story that I heard. And then of course, going on, he had a lot of different incidents, like even when he decided to go to medical school, they would not allow him to come to UNC Chapel Hill, which is where he wanted to go, and because of his, you know, color. And they decided, the state decided to go ahead and subsidize his medical school education going to Howard University. And that's how he got to Howard. And part of his commitment was coming back to North Carolina. And that's how he ended up in High Point. So, I mean, I'll be able to share a couple other things. I'm trying to fit it in based on the questions.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
But what I think is amazing, Ms. Jones and Ms. Tillman McAllister, what you have shared is that the humility for people started at a young age for both of them. Based on how they grew up and what they observed. Ms. Jones, tell us a little bit about your father's practice and how long he was in medicine here in the Piedmont.
I know that we probably got to a high point in the early to mid 60s. He attended medical school in Nashville, Tennessee, Meharry. And I'm sorry about the dog. I couldn't decide if I should put the dog out and let it bark or let it stay in and bark. And I'll put her out in a minute. But after Meharry, he did his internship at Reynolds Hospital. Then we moved to Lexington, where he practiced for a little while. And then we came to High Point. And I think we came to High Point soon after Dr. Murray Davis passed away. And he practiced up until, I guess, his last day on earth in 1993.
Wow. Now, at one point, he was on East Avenue, right? Kind of near the Daniel Brooks community.
Yeah, that was his final office on East Avenue, but he started out on Moon Street in the back of the Masonic Lodge on Washington Street. Wow. Then he moved his office to Dr. Davis's old office in the curve on Washington Street. And then finally he built the office on East Avenue.
Okay, wow. Did he ever express why those locations were so important of trying to be accessible to people?
Well, because he always said that the Black community was his people and he wanted to be accessible to them.
And sometimes he wouldn't even take payment, right?
Well, I think that's probably pretty common. Okay. Back then. Payment, no payment, payment in trade. If you needed medical attention, you were going to get it.
Oh, that's so wonderful. Well, this is for both of you ladies, and Ms. Tillman McAllister, feel free to pick this up here. So what was it like growing up? I get the sense that your father saw patients almost like an extended family, the way they were treated.
Put the dog out.
Okay, yes, ma'am, Ms. Jones, feel free to come back and join us anytime.
Yeah,
yes.
You're right. That's exactly the way it was. And in fact, what Adrian was saying before, I used to work in my daddy's office. And so I would get so angry. Not angry. Yeah, angry. Because I was like, why aren't they giving me any money? They would bring sweet potatoes. They would bring collard greens. Sometimes they would just bake stuff and then drop them off on the back porch at our house. And so, but he said, he used to always say, there's more to life than getting paid. Mm-hmm. And so, that was his way of giving back to the community as well. He had delivered 4 or 5 children in one family, and they had only paid him $10, and I was like, Daddy, when are we gonna collect this money? I was trying to be a good steward of the office, but not understanding until he finally said that. And Daddy was a man of little words. He was so quiet and so humble. And so I finally got it without him sitting down and explaining it to me. And I think that has had an impact on my family's life, as well as my children and my grandchildren's lives too. But he just kept on pushing on, and he chose that part. We lived on Washington Street for the longest time when we moved from Troy. And in fact, I still own that property now. But we had a 1-bedroom apartment on top of the building, and that's where we stayed. My sister and I stayed, and then he had an office down below. So we still, hold on to that with the memory. And actually, the first place that we lived is on Hobson Street, so it's still there too. But we don't own that now. But
I remember the Hobson Street house.
Oh yeah. It was. Daddy helped to build that place. His daddy was a construction person. He was a bricklayer, and Daddy helped to build that place. He helped to build the office that he eventually moved into. And so he just always had this hands-on thing. In fact, I still have out in the backyard here the playhouse that he built. I remember him calling me in saying, come here, let me measure you for the door. And I'm like, measure me? And I was like, well, so that house is still out there. And so I have played in mine, Bonnie, Tammy, Chip played in there. Then I have my children that played in there, and now my grandchildren play in there. So, and they're 15 through 2. So 15, 13, 3, and 2. So all of us have had an impact, and they listen to stories about what it was like to be around Daddy. And even though he worked like crazy, because a lot of times, Adrian, as you know, oh, that's right, she stepped out.
Oh, she's back.
Oh, okay. But, you know, a lot of, they only had one ward in the hospital that would see Black patients. And so sometimes we didn't see Daddy for 2 and 3 days at a time. I guess he and Dr. Jones kind of switched up or whatever, but they were making sure that they had the patients had quality care in High Point, because some of the doctors just would not, they refused to see the patients. So
Yes, thank you so much, Ms. McAllister. Ms. Jones, can you also share a little bit more of the challenges during that time with being a Black doctor?
Well, I do know that housing was problematic for us when we first came to High Point. We lived with 2 different families, and we lived in a duplex on Tryon Street on the south side of High Point. And I think maybe the first place we lived was on 4th Street, that in a house that's across the street from the old YMCA, with a man named Mr. Lemon. Then we lived with Mrs. Elmiker on Winley Street. Her son was a police officer. Then we moved to Tryon, and then finally we moved to the house on Rafford Street. And I found out after my father passed away that I'm not sure exactly what the situation was, but he was not able to get a mortgage to buy that house. And the people down the street from us, who actually, the wife ended up being his longtime secretary, Mrs. Boyd, the Boyds had to somehow get the loan to buy the house for us. And there was a deed in their name, which came out, we found when we were settling the estate. And Mama and I did not know about this, but the deed was in their name, and they later quit claimed the deed over to my parents.
wow.
Wow. So even though your fathers are contributing so much, they were still treated as second-class citizens in many ways.
Absolutely,
Oh, yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
Wow. Unbelievable. Well, thank you for that, ladies. I do want to move to achievements and highlights. Ms. Tillman McAllister, your father delivering 3,000 babies during segregation. Wow. So many projects he was involved in and successfully delivering Black conjoined twins. That's just a small highlight of so many things he did. What do you think he would say has been his greatest achievement, if he could share that with us today?
Well, I would say that a lot of people, including his family, would say all of those achievements were very, very important, but he would say that it was about his family. And his family included the community as well. Because when I tell you, Daddy, I can't remember how many years after they stopped doing home visits, that Daddy would still go to do house calls to his members or whatever. So he would always make sure that he took care of the community and his family. And all of that other stuff, yeah, I mean, the community, the boardsmanship, all of those things like that, he set a great model for. But if you were to ask him, he would say that it was all about family and helping us to learn. I mean, he didn't always tell us what to do, but he modeled. I can remember one time when he got arrested and was taken away in a paddy wagon, I was young, and my mother was pregnant with their fourth child. He hadn't even been born yet. And I pushed the panic button because I was still the oldest. And I was like, my mother is getting ready to go into labor. And I remember when they handcuffed him and put him in the paddy wagon, and he looked at me and he said, just take care of everybody. And when I tell you, if you ask me some of the things that I carried on with me to this day, it was taking care of everybody else. And he modeled that. He didn't have to say it. He just he just kind of mouthed it to me. And so when it comes to the other boards that I have been on and kind of followed in his footsteps without him telling me to do it, I remember that as the point in my life where I said, I have to do what Daddy said to do.
Wow, that is powerful. Ms. Jones, how did your father, what would he say is his greatest achievement? And then I'll also ask you, how has he influenced your life in terms of life lessons you've taken away from him?
I don't know what he would say is his greatest achievement. I think probably he stressed being honest in every way that you possibly could be when I was growing up. You know how kids are, how you want to not tell the truth. Well, now I pretty much feel guilty when I don't tell the truth. And I think it's because of the way he really stressed that. I don't think that he would really say that he achieved much. He was pretty low key and
Am I connected?
just
to the meeting?
went about his thing.
That's kind of the way both of them were. They were low key, they just were, I don't know what you would call it, but they were real low key. And a lot of times I think that they could have been very, very bitter about some of the ways that they were treated. In fact, I can remember Daddy was an avid golfer, and one of the white golfers that was on the course passed out, and Daddy revived him. And the man, when he saw that it was a Black somebody touching him, he said, I would rather die. Yeah, he did tell me that story. He said, I would rather die than to have another Black person he said, I can't stand it. And so I do remember that. And, but one of the things, to answer the other part of your question, which was about what things did you hold on to?
Yes, ma'am.
He always told me, he said, you are not grown until you know how to communicate, how to apologize, be truthful, and accept accountability without blaming someone else. And I'm gonna tell you, that's something I still carry to this day. And I might extract certain things, especially with my grandchildren, but it's so important for you to carry that message on.
Yes, that is so true. Well, ladies, I do want to get in one more question, and then I want to allow our audience to ask some questions. So one thing I do want to ask is kind of where we are today. I was looking at statistics, and only 5% of physicians are Black. You talk to a lot of people I've interviewed tell me it's hard finding a doctor they can relate to, they feel comfortable with, or a doctor who even looks like them. Your fathers were able to accomplish so much with so little. They didn't have unlimited access to education and resources like we do today. So what do you think has been lost between the 50s, 60s, and now 2022? And it feels like we haven't really made a lot of progress.
And I agree with you on that. I do remember after Daddy published his book of Physicians' Prayers and Meditations, that the people over at Baptist found out that, the content of it. And so they started asking him to come over and talk to the residents. And at first it started out being with the Black residents, because it's like, we need help with helping them to get their feet wet and that kind of thing. But now it has evolved into, in fact, I started going over there myself, speaking on his behalf, to talk to other residents. I mean, all residents, to just talk to them about what are the skills and the resources you need. And it was like they were so hungry for that, because a lot of times in medical school, they don't teach you how to communicate. And that was the biggest void in not only them, but with, all of the residents, because they just don't know how. It's just not a skill. They teaching so much about the theory and the practice, but not the communication and that kind of thing. So I think that's part of it. And because those are resources, I mean, those are skills that you definitely need in order to be. In fact, I've been over to Baptist myself and said, why don't these people know how to talk to, families, how to talk to patients and that kind of thing, regardless as to what their color is.
Wow, thank you for that. Ms. Jones, do you have any thoughts on that as well, in terms of what are we missing today in terms of more visibility of Black doctors and just patient care in general?
I think that the practice of medicine has really changed from back in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. Dr. Tillman and my daddy, they had to do everything. They delivered babies, they treated babies, they treated the parents, they treated the grandparents. They had to make the calls, and they had to give the bad news and the good news. And it's not like that now. No computers back then. Today, everything is computerized, everything is compartmentalized. You go to a different doctor for different parts of the body. And I think that probably medical school is different. Back in my daddy's day and Dr. Tillman's day, there was Howard, there was Meharry. I don't think there was no more house yet. That was where you went if you wanted to be a physician and you were of the African American community.
Yes. And I do want to go back to that point of not being bitter. What kept your fathers focused, even when they could have been upset? What kept them motivated just to keep their eyes on doing what they were called to do?
Well, I know my daddy, he truly enjoyed his job. He got up in the morning and he looked forward to going to work. He always said that he would never retire, that he would die on his way to work. And that's actually what happened. So he enjoyed his job. He enjoyed, even though it was high stress, he found ways to relax. And I know Dr. Tillman did too. And I don't think that he regretted 1 minute.
Wow.
I would agree with that too. And I think, like you said, Adrian, that they had different ways to kind of work their ways through it. I mean, I know Daddy hunted. I mean, I think I stuck a picture in there of him and his rabbits, and he went deer hunting, and then he played golf. And of course, we talked about how they would plant things like tomatoes and things like that. So gardening, I think that came from their rural upbringing, that they never lost how important it was to provide those kinds of things for families and communities. And to this, I mean, up until Daddy, started going down, I mean, he still was, carrying tomatoes and everything by people's homes. He would dispatch me out when he didn't feel like it. And I would go and just have a trunk full of things. And he said, take this to this person, take this to that person. And I mean, that was even after he retired. So I think it was just very important that they kept up with their roots, and even down to going back and visiting family, I guess outgrowths of people's family. They never forgot them. So they would go, Aunt so-and-so was 80 something or 90 something or whatever, or what they called the big meeting, which was a reunion, family reunion kind of thing. And so he just insisted on that kind of stuff, even though he just never said it. We just knew that that's what we had to do.
I
And
see. Yes. And
yeah.
so you saw generations of people that were treated by your dads. Do people still come up to you today and share words of encouragement or how much they meant to them?
Yes,
Sure
they
do.
do.
Yeah.
And I still will go ahead and fake it and say, "Oh, I know who you are," because I always knew. In fact, when I would take my kids to the grocery store or places like that, then they would say, "Mama, is this gonna be a long grocery store visit, or is this gonna be?" I can't
Keita,
tell you, but if it's somebody in there that I know that recognizes me, I'm gonna speak to everybody now.
Keita, have you ever been out? I know you've been out in public and you know, just tending to your business, and somebody walks past you and says, "Aren't you Dr. Tillman's daughter?"
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
I do. I still do. I mean, it depends on where I am. What
Yeah.
actually doesn't depend. That's why I tell my kids, just go ahead and speak to everybody, because we don't want. This was before mom and daddy left, but you don't want them to go back and tell me or mama and daddy that you didn't speak to them. So I mean, it was just a common practice.
Yeah. And Natalie, one more thing that I know, Shakita and I have a similar experience, is that both of our mothers worked in our father's offices.
Yeah.
They were the secretaries. And both of our mothers were in education and had the opportunity to pursue their own careers, but they supported their husbands in their practice.
Yeah, now that's the truth. I mean, mama was more in charge than daddy was.
Yeah.
Even though, believe it or not, until we were able to get a wash and dryer after work, daddy would take the diapers and go to the laundromat and, wash the diapers and everything for mama. So, I mean, it was such a good partnership for them to support each other in all of their endeavors. And so they always reached out to the community. Like someday, I'm gonna give you a real quick example. I know that I told you that several days that we didn't see daddy, but when he came home, we would get in the car. It would be like a station wagon, and he would start riding around in the neighborhood. And we'll say, because we were trying to find the snowball man, so we can get snowballs. And so we'll say, "It's this way, it's this way." And he'll say, "No, no, I don't think it's that way." And we would end up riding in our whole neighborhood with the car full, because he would pick up kids, our friends in the neighborhood, all along the way. And so I remember us, then he would finally say, "Okay, I can't carry any more kids in here." And so we would get the snow cones, So anyway, daddy said, "Oh, I think everybody's got theirs." And he looked at me and I said, "Well, I don't know what kind I want, daddy." He said, "Just get a flavor from all of the flavors." And I mean, that made me feel so special, because they were like, "How did you know to get all of those flavors in one thing?" And I said, "Well, that's just his reward." So he didn't always come out and say it, but he showed me how important it was to reach out and to, help other people who were disadvantaged and that kind of thing. And so it's just another thing that I carried along with me too.
Yes. And Miss Jones, thank you so much for acknowledging your mothers. Yes, they played such a huge role. your mothers, were they just as encouraged by the impact that your dads were making? And did you see them sort of express that to them through words and action?
Yes, my mother, she would cook a big meal. Okay, we had breakfast, and then during the middle of the day, she would cook a big meal because that's what they did a lot of times on farms and everything, so people could have those kinds of meals. And when I tell you, Daddy, you never knew who Daddy was going to bring home. It could be the milkman. It could be, the man who fixed shoes. I mean, so we never knew. That's one reason why she had big meals too, because so to me, that was her way of encouraging Daddy and supporting him in making sure that he reached out and made sure everybody knew that they were important. And when I tell you, it could be, all kinds of people. And one of the things that he also did was to bring home celebrities. I mean, I can remember Sammy Davis Jr., all kinds of people that showed up at our house at dinner time. And we didn't know, Mama never knew who was going to show up. And Oprah Winfrey has been there. I mean, it's like, all these people, this is late on down the line, but we just never knew whether it just be somebody he picked up off the street or somebody that he talked to, some celebrity's friend. And they were like, well, they wanted to meet you. And because they like to play golf too, they would come to different places in the area. And so that's to me, I don't think I ever heard her say that, but she just always was so accommodating, and everybody just was happy to be there. It was just happy.
And I see Tammy has written that someone from the Harlem Globetrotters came too. I'm sorry, I saw it in the chat.
Curly Neal. Yeah, Curly
Oh
Neal.
yes, that's what she said, Curly Neal. Okay.
Yes. She had, oh my goodness, I don't even know where I put that piece of paper, but I was writing down at some point about all of the he and Jesse Jackson were good friends. Jesse never came to our house, but he and Daddy spent a lot of time together. Oh, Daddy had at our church that we went to off of it's called First Baptist Church. Martin Luther King came there and met with our preacher, and they sat and ate fried chicken and pound cake. And so here he was sitting there, talking strategy and everything with Martin Luther King. And he was a young person, compared to Daddy and our preacher. But, so he hobnobbed with everybody.
Yes, he did. Thank you, Ms. Tillman McAllister, for those memories. Ms. Jones, before I turn it over to the audience, did you have any stories you wanted to share about your mother?
I know that she worked in his office and she supported what he did, but I know she did not like working in the office. She couldn't deal with that, 24/7 thing because Daddy could be difficult at times to deal with. And so she couldn't wait to actually go back to education. And sometimes I'll get are you Dr. Jones's daughter? Or are you Miss Jones's daughter? She taught me in the 3rd grade, and she was a giver too.
Wow, that's right. That's right. Her own area of impact. Yeah. That's wonderful. Well, ladies, I have so enjoyed hearing your stories. I certainly want to pass the baton over to our listeners for any questions. So at this point, I will turn it back over to our moderators so they can bring in some other questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Natalie.
Well, thank you, ladies. Don't go anywhere because these questions will be for you all, and I will give you an opportunity to answer them. Anybody that has questions, if you will, please place them in the chat. And Janet, can you also give them the number again if they want to text? We have some that were texting and I'll be reading those, but if you still would like to text some, you can text to this number as well, Janet.
Yes, feel free to also text those questions and comments to 336-577-4368. That's 336-577-4368.
Thank you, Janet. I'm going to read the first question that I have from the text. How connected were your families? And I'm assuming this means the two families of our panelists, your families together. How connected were your families?
Pretty connected. I can't remember a time when I did not know Shakita, Benita, Tammy, and I remember Chip Otis Jr. actually being born. I remember him as a baby.
Yeah, me
The
too.
Tillmans, you guys were here before we got here. And I think that you pretty much made us feel welcome.
Well, it was very, very nice to be able to have another family that had very similar backgrounds and you know, from the rural area perspective and then from education, because my mother was able to, let me see, she had to, because my grandmother worked in somebody's home, and so my mother had to be kept by her four brothers. And the teacher started noticing that my mother was missing. No, the brothers were missing, and that they were having to take turns to watch my mother. And so when the teacher finally found that out, she was like, bring her on. And I think she was 3 at that time. And so she ended up starting college when she was 14. And that was the first person in their family that had ever gone to college. So after she got out of college, she ended up going back and teaching at the school that she graduated from. And some of the students were older than she was. Um, so it just, oh, I'm just reading. Okay. But yeah, so I was real happy to hear that all of us had the same kind of background with the parents and, you know, our thirst for education and, you know, just trying to support the family, but also supporting, you know, the community through education as well.
Thank you so much. We do have another question. How do you think your fathers would respond to COVID-19 and what recommendations would they give?
Whew. Dad
Well,
was go
I
ahead.
know my dad would say, get vaccinated.
Yeah. That's what I would think that Daddy would have said too, you know, rather than to let it be a racial thing or whatever. It's like everybody just needs to be taken care of. And so, yeah, I think he would have recommended that as well.
Thank you. We do have some more questions. Let's see, I had something that said community involvement or engagement. I'm not sure if there's something we can share. I'm not sure if that's a question or statement, but there was something that said community involvement or engagement.
I'm sorry, Latoya, that was a question.
Okay.
If they could talk about some of their father's community involvement in the community and some of the engagements that they had in this community outside of their role as doctors.
Thank you, Janet.
I think I wish I had brought my list because I thought everybody would already know, but I know how he was very involved with the United Way, with a community foundation, with High Point University. So the list just goes on. I mean, he was on the Model Cities Board, which was something to kind of help develop the whole High Point area. And when it came to when we were having a lot of trouble with the Black boys in the community, he was called to Raleigh to serve on different boards and different task force to kind of just try to help where he could. So, I mean, the numbers just are just crazy, but he did hang on in there, and you know, it was hard for him to say no, especially when he thought it was a good cause.
Thank you. We have a question in the chat. I'm going to try to scroll to that just a second. What message would your fathers give to young men today?
Be accountable. Take care of your families. Family is first, and you know, let's find a way. And I think what he would do was to see how they could play a more active role in trying to plan and to organize how this could be made better. Because I think one of the things that Daddy used to always say, that when people lose hope, it's hard for them to move forward. And I think that in a lot of cases, um, the young boys just don't have anything to hold on to. And I know Daddy always made sure that we were active in some kind of way, whether it be with Mama helping or him helping or whatever. He would always just try to achievement. And then if you get in trouble, then it when I tell you, discipline was very, very important to him and to my mother. Yeah. So I think a lot of that's missing, the fragmented families. Um, and but he would say, you need to find a way to be accountable and find a way to make this work. And I think that one of the things that he worked on was to try to figure out how to include the young men in making the plan together. Because I think whenever you're trying to help somebody move or to be, you know, achieve some things, that you have to include them on the plan, because if not, you just can't keep going on and say you got to do this and you got to do that without them being a part of the plan.
I think some of the things my dad would share with young men today is to educate yourself, to read the classics, read the newspapers, read information on investing, how to take care of your money, how to earn money, how to make yourself secure in life. Those were things that he actually stressed a lot that I was never interested in when I was growing up, but I am interested in now. And I wish I had paid more attention when he was trying to get me to pay attention.
Ms. Jones, I'm going to switch back to your dad's picture, but we did have a question just to clarify which Dr. Jones was your dad. So I don't know if there's anything else you'd like to share about your dad that they can, but this is a picture for the question that we had. For this is Dr. Julius L. Jones, and anything you want to add for the person that wanted to clarify which doctor your dad was.
I don't know. Was there another Dr. Jones in High Point?
I'm not sure. I don't know of anyone. Both of them were general practitioners, so which means they did some of everything in High Point. So,
Shakita, do you remember Dr. Wilson and
yes,
Dr. Morgan?
I remember Dr. Wilson.
Yeah.
Yeah, not Dr. Morgan though.
Well, I was going to show a couple of memories of that, just a couple of pictures of you all. If you wanted to say anything about it, feel free to. When I pull up your memories from your family, that's Dr. Tillman. There's some memories. Anything that sparked share interest you want to share from the pictures?
That second picture is when they named the mental health clinic after Daddy. And that next one is his mother. So again, I said he was all about family. And then he was an avid golfer. So that's he and my brother, as my daddy was getting him into golf as well. And that's my oldest daughter. I won't tell you how old she is now. She'll be mad at me, but anyway.
All right, and then Judge Caroline Pemberton, thank you for sharing some questions. And she wanted to know a little bit about more about Dr. Jones. She said that she knows of a Dr. Perry Jones, who is an anesthesiologist. She joined a little bit late. She saw what's on the advertised on the news and thought she'd jump in, and was happy that she did. And I think that's where her question came from. Thank you. All right, I'm going to share a few pictures from our Dr. Jones. Anything you want to say about those, Ms. Jones?
He had the sweetest smile. That's not me. I mean, that's not Adrian. I'm saying that about him because he always made you feel so warm.
I'm kind of a combination baby, a combination of features from both parents. So I end up looking like neither one.
Is that you in the second picture?
Yeah, that's me.
But you know what? It depends on what stage of life. Sometimes I'll go 5 years and they'll say, oh, you look just like your daddy. And then I'll go another 5 years and they'll say, oh, you look just like your mom. So,
you know, there used to be a picture in your house of your mom when she was younger, maybe in a college graduation picture or something like that. But she looked Bonita looked just like her in high school.
Yeah.
You know the picture I'm talking about?
Yes, I do. I do know exactly which one you're talking about because both of them had those tiny, tiny waists.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, ladies, I'm going to give the audience one more minute. If they like to ask some questions, I'm happy to continue to do that. We still have time if you like to do that. And we'd happy to, I know you all are happy to answer any questions. So if you have any text or put it in the chat, we're happy to answer.
Latoya, you do have one in the chat, and I wanted to say something about Dr. Jones, that some information that actually Adrian sent me. Like, your father actually participated or was a member of the Old North State Medical Society as well, and he was a Toastmaster.
Yeah, he did Toastmasters, but I think Old North State and the National Medical Association, they were like the National Medical Association was like the African-American version of the AMA. In Old North State, I think that was North Carolina Medical Association, wasn't it, Keita?
Old North State still exists today.
Yeah. I remember they had to do continuing education, and I probably had, I was fortunate because I was the only child and it was like 4 you Tillman children. But I got to go to several conventions for the National Medical Association as a little kid, and that was fun.
Yeah, we liked hanging out, didn't we?
Yeah.
Traveling
Sure did.
and stuff. Yeah.
We do have it's not a question, but more of a comment in the chat that I'll read. So you all, this is from Daniel Webb. He says, I've had the privilege to serve as the pastor of Greater First United Baptist Church for both Tillman and Sister Barbara Tillman. And they were both loving, caring, and supportive people with a great love for the Lord. It is truly a blessing to hear such a personal reflection, to hear such personal reflections. All right. Well, I don't have any more questions, so I am going to start moving into our next phase of just kind of some closing remarks. I believe our president, Jane Leapshire, is on, and I'm putting her on the spot, and I'm not sure if she would like to share something, but if you're here, Jane, feel free to go on and share something with us.
Thank you, Latoya. Absolutely. Well, ladies, it's just been such a privilege to hear your story. I am not a native of High Point, and so I'm always so excited to hear the history and your fathers were such trailblazers in this community. And so thank you. Thank you so much for sharing this rich history. And just like me, you both miss your daddies terribly, and they had a huge impact on your lives. And clearly they did a wonderful job with both of you. So thank you again so much.
Thank you, Jane. And I do have another message in the chat, and I'd like to read this. This is from Miss Tammy Jones. And she says, as the third daughter, I just want to thank you for providing this forum to reflect on our fathers in such a loving and supportive way. Mom and Daddy made a huge impact on the community. Sorry, my little scroller went down too far. Sorry about that. See if I can find it again. Okay. Mom and Daddy made a huge impact on the community. It was such a blessing. I guess the scroller doesn't want to go there. There we go. Mom and Dad made a huge impact on the community. It was such a blessing to be their daughter. Oh. Thank you, Miss Tammy.
And Latoya, we have one that's on Facebook that Wilhelmina Bozier said, whenever you went to Dr. Tillman's office, with money or without money, he treated you like you always treat you like you were somebody.
Thank you, Janet, and thank you, Ms. Bozier. All right, we'll continue with our closing remarks, and I'm gonna move to Mr. Joe Barnes. And he is our Vice President of Resource Development at United Way of Greater High Point. Joe?
Yes, good evening. Good evening. What a rich conversation and full of inspiration. And I'm just so excited to have known Dr. Otis Tillman the short time that I knew him. And I do apologize to Ms. Jones. I don't think that I ever had the opportunity to know your father, but Dr. Tillman was a great man and great community leader. And we were just blessed to meet him and be connected to him. I'm also here today with one of our other community leaders, and that's Mrs. Mary Lou Blakeney. And she wants to share just a quick memory of Dr. Tillman at this time.
Good evening, comrades. I'm sorry I couldn't be there with you today.
You okay? She said, good evening, Ms. McCallum.
But it would have been awesome if I had been able to get to you today. But circumstances wouldn't let that happen. But know that when you're doing things like this, it's close to my heart. I'm always going to be somewhere up there flying around. But anyhow, Dr. Tillman was like family to me. Why? Because my dad was his first patient. He couldn't wait till he got in his office on Monday. His picture was in the paper on Sunday, and his doctor was out of town, and my aunt knew him. So she went flying over to Dr. Perry Little's house and got him and his wife. He brought Dr. Tillman to my house, and I had never seen him.
What was your father's name?
Johnny Andrews. He worked at Tip Top Bakery.
All right.
Dr. Tillman walked in our door, and I never saw a man that tall in my life before him. Really, that I'm not up close and personal. So I started teasingly calling him Dr. Tall Man. But the families became very close. We felt like they were family. They treated us like family. And as the person said 2 people ago, if you walked in that office, he treated you like you were special. Right. He was a very, very good doctor and never failed to say, what are you doing down in that nursing school? Whenever I'd come home from school just to see, he wanted to know what the kids were doing. He was a stellar person, and he loved this community, as did his wife, Barbara, and all the other kids. Hi, Chiquita. But
Hi.
Anybody's kids. So we do miss him. We miss her.
Yes. So we're so grateful to both of you all for taking time out of your busy schedules to share such rich history and memories and personal stories about your fathers and the impact that they had on the High Point community and had on the world. So we leave this session tonight with advice from the past of to be accountable, to educate ourselves, to read, to take care of others, to speak to everybody, and to do what is right. And we just thank God and thank your fathers for their excellent work. And we appreciate you all so much for being a part of our United Way's African American Initiative and this Black History Forum tonight. And we've made history tonight by being on Zoom. And thank you for being a part of history and their legacy. Their legacy lives on in us. So we're so grateful and thank you to both of you being here. With that being said, we'll turn it back over to our moderator if she has any closing remarks, and we'll close out. Ms. Natalie Wilson, do you have any closing remarks?
Yes, I just want to say I have so enjoyed this time. I've had the honor of being able to learn about this history through what I do and through the African American Initiative. Before I go, I did, if I could just get in one more question. Ms. Jones and Ms. Tillman McAllister, unfortunately, with a lot of young people, I think this kind of history, there's a gap. So I would like to know, how do you want to see your father's legacy preserved, this history taught to our younger people? If you could give some final thoughts on that.
Well, I think this is an excellent way to preserve
That's
their
pretty
legacy.
heavy. I think that just create like this would be a great start. I mean, I'm involved with some organizations like Alpha Arts, which we're getting ready to celebrate our 90-something anniversary. So these people were doing this kind of thing long before Daddy and Dr. Jones started doing it. So, I mean, they're
think she may have
just
frozen.
communicate and to
There
find
we go.
out what their life was like.
Okay, Ms. Jones, and I'm sorry, I think you may have gotten cut off, but it sounded like you wanted to say something as well.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Oh, okay. I think this was just an excellent way to preserve their legacies. I've learned some things about Dr. Tillman that I didn't know today, and that has been a pleasure. To be honest, I really kind of dreaded doing this. I wanted to do it, but I dreaded doing it. And I'm just happy that I had the opportunity to share some of the things about my dad that, you know, yeah, he was an early trailblazer in High Point, but there were those that came before him, and there will be those that come after him. And I just hope that they kind of get inspired by what he went through.
Wonderful. Well, I've been so encouraged. You all have encouraged me to dream bigger and really think about using your gifts to make a difference. So thank you so much for that. And thank you again to Janet, Latoya, and Joe for inviting me. I always learn when we have these discussions, so I appreciate it. And those are the final thoughts that I wanted to share tonight. And thank you for everybody who attended, including other family members of the doctors. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right.
Thank
Bye.
you, everyone. This
Thank
was
you,
a great
everybody.
night. Thank you so much. And
A
this
great
will be available on our Facebook page. We were live streaming. I didn't tell you all that, but we were live streaming, and we are live streaming. But thank you all. And this will be recorded and shared through our pages. So thank you so much, everybody, and have a wonderful night.
Thank
All
you.
right.
All right,
Well,
thank you.
God bless all of you.
Be safe, guys.
And be
Good
safe.
night, and thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Keita.
Good night, Miss Jenny.
Bye-bye.
Good night.
Good night, all.
Good night,
Thank you,
everyone.
Keita.
Good night.
Thank you.
Good night, Pastor First Lady.
Bye.
All right. Thank you, Sister Rouse, for being on. Good night. Thank you,